Welcome back to yet another exciting episode of Spin Magazine's Lip Service. I'm joined today by the members of Alt J, lead singer Joe Newman and keyboard player Gus Unger. How are you guys?
Very well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad we got to do this again. I know we had a little bit of a mishap yesterday, but I'm glad we got to make this happen. So thanks for being here, both of you.
Yeah, lovely to be here.
It's funny, Joe, we were talking about, me and Gus were talking about if we had landlines, right? Like we used to use, it would have been fine. But, we all have these cell phones and we're trying to text each other. Nobody hears it. It's on silent. So we actually might single-handedly, me and Gus might bring back the landline. I don't know if you think that would be a good idea.
I like the idea of the landline, that really long extension cord that goes around the kitchen. I like that. Yeah.
We might do that. Are you guys fans, by the way, of interviews and podcasts? It's funny, Gus. I was researching that maybe an oyster podcast or a cricket podcast could be in your future.
The oyster podcast was a great idea. Unfortunately, I sort of gradually came to the conclusion that I was actually allergic to oysters, but which would make it difficult to be the host of an oyster podcast. But never say never.
I think it would make it exciting, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
it's very niche, but you know what? It could work. I feel like niche works these days. It's funny, Joe, because you're a huge fan of My Favorite Murder, I believe, right?
I am, yeah.
That's funny.
I love it.
And it's almost like a recurring theme in your music too, and we'll get into that. I want to talk about the new record and the tour and your history, obviously. But it is interesting when you think about the way that you've written for so long and the themes that prevail in your music. So My Favorite Murder actually fits right into everything we're going to get into, right?
Right. Yeah.
But let's get into it. If you don't mind, take me back to the beginning. I'd love to kind of know how you guys met. I know that you met at university back in Union Leeds, to my knowledge, and just tell me about it, like 2007. Take me back to when you guys met, how you grew up.
You go. Sorry. Well, Joe and I were in the same halls of residence at university, which is basically, I suppose you'd call it a dorm in America. And we met at a party. I think it was the first night we got dropped off by our parents in the afternoon, and then like sort of the most confident people who sort of decided to throw parties that evening. And Joe and I attended the party, and I think it was quite by chance that you even came along to that party, wasn't it, Joe?
Yeah, it was. I was with my the flatmate I'd met that day, and already we had kind of unconsciously come to the conclusion that we didn't have much in common. And it was like this kind of elephant in the room. And I was like, I didn't know anyone at university. So I was like, this was like the first day my dad had literally dropped me off that day. And I think her father had done the same. And she was like, I don't think this is the halls that I was meant to be in. And I was like, okay. She was like, I don't know what to do, but do you want to go out? And I was like, okay, we can go out. And she was like, do you know where the campus is? I was like, no. So we literally just left our halls of residence and started walking up the road. And this guy, I think he was called Mikey, from the top window of our halls that we were living in, was like, do you want to come up and like come up to this party that I'm just hosting? And we looked at each other and we were like, okay. And so we went upstairs, and I quickly met Gus in the kitchen, and we talked for the rest of the evening, I think.
And it was friends first, right? I mean, music was sort of an afterthought for you. I guess the friendship is for, and you met Tom later on, right? And you guys all seemed to meet up in college, and music, I guess, was not the first thing on your mind when you met. It was really about the friendship, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think Joe came to university with the idea of forming a band there. I think that was part of your kind of reasons for coming to art school at all. But yeah, I think we sort of spent the first year kind of sussing each other out as people, and established that we got on well, we made each other laugh, and we had stuff in common. And then we kind of got the band going in earnest at the beginning of our second year, once we were very comfortable with each other, which I think was a good thing, actually, because it does involve, it's quite... I find playing music in front of people, like in a kind of one-on-one setting, quite embarrassing. It's almost like taking your clothes off or something. You need to feel quite comfortable with that person to do it. And definitely. I think had we had the day after that party, Joe, you called me and said, come over to my room, I want to show you some songs I've been writing. I think it would have been incredibly embarrassing and awkward, and we might
Yeah.
well have just gone, that was awful, I can't, let's never do that again.
And you were
Did
like,
you-
can you put your clothes back on?
Yeah.
Did you both grow up in musical families? Was it classic rock that you were exposed to? Obviously the Zeppelins, the Floyds, or was it listening to music? Obviously some would think it would be Joy Division and obviously the darker side of music, but what was it that you were exposed to musically when you were growing up?
Well, I think you kind of have different there are different exposure points in sort of your young life. You know, the first sort of exposure to music is really what your parents are listening to.
Exactly.
And so for me that was like Jimi Hendrix, The Who, Led Zeppelin, and then you had like Jeff Buckley, and you had all of the Laurel Canyon kind of groups, and then my dad was a massive fan of like Eva Cassidy and Elvis Costello, the Beatles, and so you kind of that's their first exposure site, and then you go into your friendship groups, and then you start building like foundations there, and as you grow into being a teenager you start discovering music. And for me that was stuff that my friends' brothers used to listen to, which was English hip hop and American kind of early 90s West Coast hip hop. And so that was another exposure site where I kind of really enjoyed what I was listening to.
Now, was that like the Streets and Skepta and things like that on the British hip hop side
So
of it?
it was kind of like bands like For Life Cypher, and the Streets were involved in that, yeah, for sure. Skepta a little bit, and not Skepta, sorry. And then you had Wiley, and then Brain Tax. A lot of just like small underground artists that are kind of like the bedrock of what British hip hop was in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I could probably do a whole podcast on how great Jeff Buckley was. One of the greatest singers ever. So that's another episode, which we will definitely get to one day. But Gus, were you exposed to the same kind of music, or was it different? Were you
completely different. Yeah, I grew up with much more of a classical music education and upbringing. So I was a chorister in my local cathedral. So I was sort of for 4 years of my childhood singing in the cathedral every day, doing like church services and stuff, and then learning on the side. I was learning the piano, having singing lessons, having oboe lessons. And then my mum's family was more into like English folk, traditional English folk. So kind of just like singing folk songs really. And I suppose if you've ever heard of like the Copper family or that kind of thing. So that was another sort of part of my musical education. But then when I was a teenager, I was more into like kind of indie rock and the whole mid-noughties British indie scene. But yeah, I think it was kind of great that when Joe and I met, we sort of like, we actually came from completely different corners and, sort of like taught each other in a way, I think. And actually, work, if we'd had too much in common musically, I don't know if the band would have worked so well. I think it's quite important that, and then Tom's like was like a real heavy metal guy, and that was pretty much all he listened to and all he'd ever played. So
I was going to say, not even metal. It sounds like death metal he was into, right?
Yeah.
Which is,
I think so.
The extreme
I'm not
side
an
of life.
expert.
No, he kind of loved all sorts of categories of metal, like industrial metal, death metal, black metal,
Grind.
tech metal, grind. It was like loads of stuff, and like all bands of that Gus and I had never heard of. But we kind of bonded. For me, I bonded with Tom over like Lamb of God. I quite like Lamb of God in 2007. But then as a group, I think the blanket that kind of kept us warm creatively was Radiohead.
One of the
An
greats.
unusual analogy there, but
Yeah.
so we all discovered that I'd been listening to Radiohead for a long time before university. Tom discovered Radiohead at university, and I believe, Gus, you were kind of you dipped in and out of Radiohead maybe.
Yeah, I was a late comer to Radiohead, and I think but definitely being around you guys really made me realize how much I'd been missing, and I did my best to catch up.
That was at the time so we were really working as a group, working on songs at the time In Rainbows came out. So I think that album has had made sort of was a catalyst in us kind of discovering a pathway that we could all go down as different musicians with different musical backgrounds, but we kind of followed that route, and it was a huge influence on us, I think, at the time.
It's interesting. I think that you guys even used GarageBand initially when you started making music. And I love the story how Tom, your drummer, would come over and just bring a snare and then bring a tom and then bring a bongo, and obviously piecemealing it together. And ultimately it led to that, it's, the sound and the idea that the drums are not meant to be overbearing and almost minimalist in your music, but yet it works so well. And I guess I think back to Radiohead and their use of rhythm and what they've done. They were so innovative, what they were doing, almost hauntingly so. So do you think that had a lot of the effects, the fact that you couldn't play so loud when you started getting together in these dorm rooms, right? It sort of helped shape the sound of the music in a way.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think the sound was dictated in so many ways by our practical circumstances, both the volume thing, Tom having these kind of like minimal drums, he pretty much stopped bothering to bring more drum stuff after about 3 weeks. So he was just left with, a few things. And I had this keyboard that Joe had somehow got his hands on that was a sort of secondary school, all in one sort of one-stop shop Yamaha kind of sort of thing, a cheap sort of kids Yamaha keyboard. And you had an acoustic guitar, didn't you, Joe, which your dad had sort of lent you?
Yeah.
And I think just somehow that was those material circumstances, I think, really were influential on our sound. And, we developed this kind of like trip hoppy, folky sort of electronic thing going on, which, we've obviously, so much has changed since then, but I still think that fundamentally did shape what kind of band we ended up being.
And you meet Gwil, obviously, too. You guys form this band, you start writing music together. And it's interesting, Joe, I mean, given the lyrical content and the fact that a lot of the music sort of seemed to focus on death and tragedy and love, was it that as a child you had a lot of these experiences growing up, or was it just your fascination with, obviously the occult or death in a way? What was it that sort of led you to write in this way?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter. I mean, I've come from a wonderful, stable upbringing and have avoided, kind of the bereavement, like close family bereavement. So it really came from a fascination with the darker side of the human condition. And I kind of like, I think university helps you reshape your critical thinking and your voice as an artist, and you realize or quickly subscribe to the idea that nothing should be off limits when you're creating work, subject material, that is. And you talk about what moves you, and often what moves me is the things I fear most, which is the idea of losing loved ones. I think that kind of is a theme that's traveled across the history of our output.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, obviously it worked so well for you guys, and obviously it's a formula that seemed to really resonate with a lot of people. At a certain point, you guys moved to Cambridge. I don't know if Cambridge is a hotbed of musicality and if there's a lot of record labels there and whatnot, but what made you move from university to Cambridge? Why not just move straight into town and start to hit the club scene and start to perform?
I think that we actually wanted to be somewhere that was not so distracting. We talked about moving to London. By this point, we had a manager and we had a couple of other people, working for us, a booking agent and stuff. But, the temptation was to move to London. But I think we just thought, let's be closer to London, but actually stay away from the distractions of London. And, London can be a very brutal place. And actually, you move there, it's expensive to live there. So, we probably would have had to get jobs like, I don't know, as waiters or something. And, next thing you know, you've got no time to do the band because you're just so exhausted from your waiting job or your bar job. And I think actually, so we moved to Cambridge, we found ourselves a little 2-bedroom house that we all squeezed into together. We signed on, as we say here, which means we sort of signed up for a weekly check from the government of, I think it was about £60. Plus they paid our rent, which was very helpful. And, we sort of knuckled down and just like did band practice every day. And, I think it was, it was really good. I think Cambridge now, I think actually has a bit more of an exciting music scene. I think there's a few bands coming out of there now, like what are they called? Black Country New Road. I think they're from Cambridge. an exciting. But when we were there, I mean, very much nothing going on, I would say. Would you agree, Joe?
Yeah, apart from drinking pints, yeah, there wasn't much.
Well, obviously, we all know Manchester, right? But I just never really think of Cambridge as a hotbed of musicality in a way. But at that point, had you had the name, or were you still going by the films, or where was the name at in this process here?
I think we were still.
We were all J.
We were all J.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we changed to films when we were in Leeds, because we were playing at a festival called Live at Leeds when we were called Films, and that was where the whole confusion arose, and we sort of decided to change our name after that because we got mixed up with another band called The Films. It's interesting to look back on that period, because it was, in a way, it was a very brief time in our lives. And actually, we moved to Cambridge, I think, in like August 2011 would have been, I think, Joe. And then by November we'd signed a record deal, and then by the beginning of 2012 we were off on tour. And that was in a way the beginning of our that was the beginning of our big year when everything just changed and blew up. And by the end of 2012 we were kind of essentially famous. But at the time it felt like a very long time, didn't it, living in that house together and rationing food and giving each other haircuts and just sort of generally, like, it was quite a crazy time. Romantic when you look back on it, but actually quite difficult at the time.
Who was actually the hair cutter in the band? Was there one of you that was the one giving the haircuts or something? Or?
There's a picture of Gwil cutting my hair. He's the ex-member of the band. And I think we also, Gwil's partner at the time, she would just cut a hole in a bin bag. Do you call it refuse sack in America?
I don't even know what that is. I feel
like a trash bag.
Trash bag.
A trash bag. Okay,
plastic bag.
So, the trash bag. Right, okay.
Yeah, you cut a little hole in the trash bag and you just pop your head through.
Oh, right.
And then cutting the hair. It's like, it was just brutal. But
we used to have this machine in America called the Flowbee, and it was like a vacuum cleaner to cut hair. And they sold it as like an infomercial. So you would just, I don't know, have these settings, and basically like a hair vacuum. So I never bought one, but it seems like that would have been a good thing for you guys back in the day to pick up. But it's funny, Joe, your voice is so distinct and obviously so incredible. I mean, how did you find your voice early on? Were you sort of experimenting? I know that I heard that there was sort of a way for you to avoid hurting your throat initially, and you were sort of a little bit reluctant to sing in front of people, right?
Yeah, it's such a, as to go back to what Gus was saying, it's such a personal process, sort of revealing your voice to people, because it's actually quite vulnerable. Your vulnerability is high because people are watching you use your voice like an instrument, and you don't yet know how to use it confidently, so you have to go through these stages of just sort of like exhibiting yourself, and it was really scary, and so for a long time I'd always been curious about singing to the guitar, me playing the guitar, but I wanted to do it privately because I just wasn't ready to sort of like put myself on show like that. But then when I went to university, I was like, it's now or never. This is a new place. Geographically, you don't know Leeds at all. You don't know anyone going to Leeds. You're going to be making friends. You're going to be meeting, musicians. You're going to be meeting artists. And if you're not going to take that leap of faith now, then when are you going to do it? So it was really quite there's a certain fearlessness that you had to act on. And so I did that. And I found that at first my voice was hitting the kind of late noughties. We called it Mockney, which is like mock Cockney accent. Okay. And a lot of people used to sing like, still do, they kind of would sing like that, where they would sound very British and very Londonized. And it was just the style at the time.
Was that like the Happy Mondays or one of those bands that had a very thick? I'm trying to think of a band.
I would give you.
They were a Manchester band, weren't they?
Yeah.
If you sound like the Maccabees, Kate Nash, Jack Pignate, it's kind of like like I'm from London kind of thing, And,
we're going deep into the Cockney accent. I don't even know those artists. Yeah.
But so I did that for a while, and I think it was a way of kind of that the affectation was there to protect myself from revealing maybe a voice that I didn't quite know how to use yet. And then the more I started singing to Gwil and the more I started singing in the band, the more comfortable I became, because everyone was excited by the songs we were writing, and at no point did someone say we should think about bringing a singer in, which is something that I suggested at some point. I think Gus was like, no, this is you're sharpening this tool that you're using at the moment, and you should keep working on it. So I did, and so even the first album I wasn't confident with my voice, but there was no better singer to sing what I was writing, so I kept with it. And then by the second album, after our success, it gave me a lot of confidence, and I think that confidence is kind of much like an arrow who's kind of shot through our discography to date, and actually has kind of sort of like at an angle has gone up and up, and my confidence has built, and I now know how to use my voice, and I have a good range, and I've got a versatile voice in terms of what I can do with it, and I'm utilizing it now. So I actually really feel comfortable with my voice more than I ever have been before.
It's interesting. I was listening to some of your early demos yesterday, and I was hearing how you were finding that falsetto and some of the first songs you recorded, because there's some stuff online when you can hear that you're actually finding that intonation and obviously that the falsetto voice that you're so well known for, and it's so distinct. But about 2011 or so, you start playing out. Obviously, you do your first record, An Awesome Wave. It's named after American Psycho, one of the greatest movies ever, right? Line in a Bret Easton Ellis movie. So talk to me about kind of leading up to that point, and obviously that record went on to win awards and got nominated and whatnot. And so talk to me about playing out at that time and all, and what it was like kind of leading up to that record for you.
We did our first. I think we had our first taste of proper touring at the beginning of 2012. We got put on the supporting an artist called Ghost Poet, who's a UK. I think he wouldn't say he's a rapper, but he's, I suppose, he's rap adjacent, and he.
Rap adjacent, I like that.
And then so we did the Ghost Poet tour, and we also just supported the band Wild Beasts, who
sure.
I think they're broken up now actually, but yeah, then another sort of. Wild Beast probably quite a similar band of a similar sensibility to us actually, but they, so we, for the first time ever, we had like a splitter van, we had a tour manager, we had a tech, we had Darren the tour manager, we had Tim the tech, and we were suddenly just driving off around the country, like doing proper actual touring. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, I remember our manager bought us as a present, as a sort of first tour present, he bought us the Curb Your Enthusiasm DVD box set, so there was a DVD player in the van, so we just watched endless episodes of Curb. Well,
by the way, my favorite show and the greatest show ever. So
yeah, well, exactly, and that was amazing, because actually we knew, I think, and then we knew we were going to go to LA for the first time when in May 2012 we went over to America to do our first American gigs, and we started in LA, and our experience of LA, well, our idea of LA was completely and utterly basically based on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Like, that was all we really knew, other than like Hollywood. It was Hollywood and it was Curb, and so we were just buzzing. And I think if I'm not mistaken, Joe, we actually did get taken to a restaurant and we did see Larry David.
Yeah,
you probably went to Craig's, because that's where I was at last night, and that's where you see him. Where'd you see him at? It's so funny.
I think it was called LA Farm.
Oh, okay. So no,
yeah,
not Craig's.
Anyway, it was very, very cool. And so, but it was that almost like that magical feeling of like, of course we're going to see Larry David, because he's in LA everywhere, according to what we know. And yeah, so we were touring. We were probably not very good at that point, but I think it was just so important that we just did so many gigs, and we obviously got better and better. And it was stressful on our first album tour, once the album came out in May, because we were suddenly doing bigger and bigger venues. In let's say, to use New York as an example, we started off at the Mercury Lounge, then went to the Bowery Ballroom, then I think we were at then we were sort of straight up to maybe Terminal 5, and then and so our manager was saying to us, guys, you've got to play for more than 45 minutes, you've got to play for at least an hour, these are big rooms. We were like, we don't have any more songs, we only have one album. So we were like chucking in covers, just like doing longer versions of the songs we had,
singing slowly.
Yeah, playing them more slowly, exactly.
What covers were you doing back then?
Oh my God. What did we do, Joe? We did a really iffy mashup. Do you remember that, Joe?
Yeah, we did. We did Real Human Being, which is on the
Yeah.
Drive soundtrack.
And we did a mashup of. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say I was talking about the mashup of Dr. Dre and Kylie Minogue that we used to do.
Oh, yeah, which was just, it was like such a hard thing to sing live because it was exceptionally high, and I didn't sing it falsetto. I sang it like with my normal voice, so it was touch and go.
I remember hearing something, Jay. You said you wanted to cover. It wasn't The Lion King. There was some Disney movie that you wanted to cover one of the songs. Right?
Yeah, it's Mulan.
Mulan, right, exactly.
I don't know what the song's called, but it's like, let's get down to business to defeat the Huns. Yeah.
That was not in the set.
No, I would like to sing it. I just think it's a deep cut for part of the Disney catalog. It's a real deep cut. I mean, I don't know how successful Mulan was, but no one knows that song except me and my sister.
Well, an Awesome Wave goes on to win the British Mercury Prize. Obviously, I would imagine that's a pivotal moment in your career. So talk about that and how important that was for the band at that point.
Well, I mean, the Mercury Music Prize was it's a prestigious award, and it was the dream. It was the dream for me, and I'm sure for you, Gus, to be nominated, let alone win, was just, it was the most validating experience, I think, of our career to date. And it was so, I can only describe it as just pure euphoria. When our name was announced, it was just like, it was like something was burning inside you, and you were walking on stage, and you were kind of sort of like almost like watery. You were just so kind of overcome by kind of nerves and excitement and kind of relief and disbelief. You were walking on stage, and you're like, oh, I've got to pull myself together and just like try and act normal and accept this award. From, I think it was Lauren Laverne?
Yeah, Lauren Laverne. Yeah.
And
we'd all been given suits by Top Man. Do you remember that?
yeah, right, yeah.
Which was it was quite funny because I think, you know, I think we felt at the time, you know, like we knew other artists, like Jessie Ware was nominated the same year as us. I remember we saw her before the awards, and she was like, oh, you know, she was like, what are you guys wearing? And we were like, well, apparently we're getting some suits from Top Man. Top Man no longer exists really, but it is like a sort of very great. Like high street. Cool, but like very high street, you know, not an expensive, you know, a suit from Top Man probably costs about £200.
Yeah.
But, you know, still good to get them free. But, you know, Jessie was like, oh, you know, yeah, like I'm getting like a sort of like a custom made Miu Miu dress and stuff. And we were like, well, we're going to be rocking the Top Man. And so I feel quite pleased that we won wearing Top Man. It's quite honest.
And at that point, obviously Gwen, Gwilin had not been in the band at that point. And how did the dynamic change for you as a band without him in the band?
So so when we won the Mercury, Gwil was part of the band, but soon after the end of touring the first album, and when we began writing the second, he kind of was just cashed in his chips, and for a number of reasons, he kind of just said, oh, you know, I don't think I can do this extensive touring. This lifestyle it's crumbling away at me. And so it was hard, but also we didn't have much of a choice. We couldn't, it's like I've been watching Band of Brothers, rewatching Band of Brothers the last couple of days, and it's a bit like that. You know, your best friend dies in the trench with you. You can't stop and mourn. You have to keep on going. And I think it was very much like that. We had a bit of a survival instinct towards the creative endeavors that people were both expecting from us, and we were kind of like excited to reignite. So we couldn't really slow down, so we just had to carry on without him. Was there some thought at a certain point of adding a fourth member again, or just kind of carrying on as a three-piece?
We did. Was it after? It's so weird. It feels like only yesterday that some of this stuff. But yeah, we did take a fourth member on tour with us on the second album tour, and it didn't really work. I think he was a lovely, lovely chap, but I think that actually it was quite difficult for him and for us, this kind of like dynamic of, is he in the band? Is he not in the band?
Right.
You
Is he
know,
a side
actually
man?
yeah, it was a bit messy, and I think it sort of messed with all of our heads a little bit in the end. So we actually, to be honest, we've embraced using a bit of backing track on stage, and I don't think we feel too much guilt about that. I think, you know, it's something that everybody does, and actually you know, the show you put on is the show you put on, and for us it works best just having the three of us on stage.
Definitely. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. Obviously, we want to get into the new record, but before then, obviously, you were nominated for a Grammy. Incredible. Another Mercury Prize. So many pivotal moments in your careers. I mean, what was any highlights other than obviously the Grammy nomination was huge for you too, right? There you go. Is that the Grammy? There you go.
That's the Grammy nom. Yeah. I go out, I wear it. I wear it
to the
around
grocery store,
yeah.
everywhere, right?
I'd be like, can I pay with my Grammy nomination medal?
To the pub.
And they're like, for the 100th time, no.
I'll have a latte. Here's my Grammy nomination.
Yeah.
We what other highlight? We won an Ivor Novello award, which was really good.
I love how you have all the awards there.
With that.
Oh, can I pay with my Ivor Novello award?
You should just carry them all around everywhere, wherever you go.
On the contact list of it's like, it's not working.
It's good for intruders because I mean it's genuinely very heavy piece of metal. You could kill somebody with this easily.
By the way, that would be a very Curb Your Enthusiasm moment if you just walked into every store carrying all your awards, asking to pay for things, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Well, so obviously, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we've been lucky enough. I was going to keep the joke going. We've been lucky enough to play some amazing venues, like Red Rocks was fantastic. We played it twice actually. So that's good.
You know, it's funny. I played at Red Rocks, and I didn't know that it was very hard to breathe up there. So you know they have those oxygen machines when you play there, and in between songs, I was like sucking oxygen. I'm like, it's so incredible and so amazing, but I can't breathe. It's like
being a drummer, I can imagine that would be a thing.
Yeah. But what an incredible venue, right? It's probably the greatest, aside from the Hollywood Bowl, the greatest venue I've ever played. Amazing. But now you're playing venues like MSG, obviously the O2 Arena. So things are obviously we have the new tour coming up, so we'll talk about the tour dates and whatnot. But take me up to the present day here. Obviously, the new record is it's coming out February here, The Dream, and it's been like 4 or 5 years since this record, since this new record's coming out. Why so long, do you think? Obviously, the pandemic, and we can get into that, but. Do you feel like you just needed the time? I think you started working on the record right at the start of when the pandemic hit, right?
Yeah, we did. I think we finished touring the last album cycle in the end of 2018. And I don't know about you, Scott, but I think after doing extensive touring, you're quite depleted and you just need time away from constant travel. And you also, for me, I need time away from my instrument. I need to sort of rebuild my relationship with my instrument, and I actually want to sort of spend time with family and friends and actually be in one place for an extended period of time. So I think we put it was like we quantified all of those feelings into deciding that it would be a year for us to just before we start writing again. And so we just gave ourselves 2019 off. And then when we came to 2020, we started writing in February, and 6 weeks into writing, the lockdown happened, or the pandemic came, and it just meant that we lived a life that was being on pause and play for the next sort of like year and a half, which was at first an inconvenience, but I think it really worked out in our favor. I think a lot of the songs are a lot richer, and we've explored them in greater depth. So the maturity of writing, I think, is on show with this album. So
it's an incredible record, by the way. Rolling Stone called it a masterpiece. It's amazing. But when you started working on this record, this was done in your own home studio now, right? Because now you had this sort of house / work live space, which you hadn't had before, right? So this new record was done and recorded in a different way than you did previously.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really nice to actually finally do that. Because we've always in the past tried to recreate that atmosphere of kind of like when we were at Leeds, you know, sort of sitting around in someone's bedroom and doing and writing music together. I think we've always felt that was a really nice way to work. So with album 2 and album 3, we sort of found places in East London where we live to work, but it was always difficult. There were always compromises. I remember like there was one place where there was always a yoga class happening in the next room, and they'd always be like, "Can you stop playing? We're trying to do yoga." And we were like, "Well, we were kind of like told we could do music here, so no." You know, and then there was on the third album, the place we found, like the guy was always booking parties in the room. The guy who rented us the room would be like, "Oh, I've got a party happening here tonight, so can you move all your kit out?" And like we were like, "Well, hang on, you can't have double bubble, mate. Like we've paid for this room, you know, like
Yeah.
fuck off." So
wasn't there that one occasion where he took it upon himself to move all of our kit into the storeroom, locked the storeroom, had like a 2-day like wild one, and then when we came to start rehearsing on Monday, he didn't know where the key was, and so all of our kit was kind of locked in to a storeroom, and we couldn't access it.
Yeah.
And we're paying for rental space. It's like
very frustrating. So we were like, okay, on this album, let's get somewhere that's properly ours. So we found this lovely house in northeast London, and we wrote there, and then we ended up recording there too. We asked our producer Charlie to move all his recording gear in, and we had this lovely kind of setup where we'd kind of like spend a couple of weeks in the writing room, and then Charlie would come in and just record us, and then we'd do 2 weeks recording. Charlie would go away again. We'd write a bit more, come back, record. It was very healthy for all of us, I think. I mean, just a lovely work-life balance, and no one ever got sick of it, because the studio can be really tough. It can be like being on a submarine. You know, you're stuck with a group of men breathing the same air for weeks on end with very little natural light. I'm sure you know. So, it was really, really nice, basically. Yeah.
And let's talk about a little bit, You and Me. It came out September 2021. It's almost like an homage to LA and California. There's skateboarding. Yeah. It's sort of right, almost like a tribute to California. So talk about some of the singles that are coming out, Get Better, and obviously Hard Drive, the latest single.
Yeah. Well, You and Me was the first song that we approached on this new album, The Dream. And we contacted our front of house engineer, Lance Reynolds, from Springfield, Illinois. And he had a list of soundcheck jams, and he sent them to us. And there was one soundcheck jam. Normally, like I'm a bit of an archivist in my head. I know all of the jams that we do. And this was one jam that no one remembered, including myself. And it had this beautiful guitar riff. It seemed like it was fully formed. And then there was a really cool chorus line. And so we all decided, well, why don't we start here? Why don't we allow this to be the first track we write for this new album? Because it has this energy that, and also we've in a way we've kind of discovered a song that we didn't know existed. So we started there, and I started writing the lyrics, and the lyrics were about January the 1st, 2020. I was at a festival, and I just had a really good time at the festival, and so I wrote about it. And then in about 6 weeks time, 6 weeks sort of like on from that writing period, the pandemic happened. So all of the lyrics took on this new meaning of like the celebration of what was once normal, and the kind of the sense of recklessness and fun and just sort of like an uncontrolled way of spending a day where you don't know what you're going to do, but you end up doing something fun. And that was all seems so far removed from the reality that we were sort of like being thrust into.
Well, in a way, the lyrics took a darker turn with what was reflecting in the life we were leading here, right? And so was COVID, obviously, there's some other prevailing themes if you think about what we were going through, and obviously Get Better talks about, COVID and the death of a partner, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's it's not a song explicitly about coronavirus and the whole pandemic, but I think it's a very much a product of it. And it's impossible not to read that song in the context of the year in which it was written, I think. we don't often deal with kind of like current events and stuff in our songs. Generally, we tend to exist in a more kind of magical, imaginative realm. But I think it felt only right to make some reference to the year we'd been through and all the sacrifices and loss that the country had made and experienced.
And obviously,
the world, in fact.
Yeah, and obviously we're still going through it. And let's talk about that, because obviously you have the tour coming up, Portugal the Man. The dates were just announced. How are you feeling about touring now in this day and age? Obviously, you're excited. Gus, we spoke about the fact that you got a new suitcase yesterday, so obviously you're getting ready. But are you feeling apprehensive? Are you feeling great? I mean, I feel like hopefully by the time you kick off in about a month or so, and I believe the tour starts in the States and ends in Canada, right? Hopefully things will calm down a little bit out there.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's super exciting. I mean, I don't think Joe, you just went on a long trip to Australia over Christmas, but I mean, I've not left the country since 2019, so I'm absolutely buzzing just to sort of get my passport stamped again and get on a plane. I really can't wait. And I think also, it's we've not really done our day job for so long. We've had a lovely few years being at home. It's been fantastic to catch up on sort of like life here, see more of our friends, spend time with our families and, our new families. Joe and I are both parents now. But, at the same time, I think there is something quite psychologically damaging about not working. And I do feel it in a way that like we haven't properly grafted, as it were, at our day job for several years. And I'm excited to start doing that again, because when you're on tour, you feel kind of relevant. You feel like you've got a purpose as a band rather than just, existing at home, kind of like, I say I'm a musician, but I'm not playing a huge amount of music at the moment.
Are you really?
Certainly not with my band. So yeah, exactly. I want to kind of get back out and get my special bar flashing, to use a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 analogy.
Are there certain songs that you're really looking forward to bringing out? Hard Drive is I think it'll be great live. Hard Drive actually talks about the cryptocurrency craze, which is going on at the moment. So very timely. Are you guys invested in crypto, by the way?
I don't think.
No,
I'm not.
No.
But it does talk about crypto billionaires, right?
It does. It's about a boy, isn't it, Joe? Sorry.
Yeah, it's kind of it's that childhood dream about being a millionaire, and what better way to measure that elitist feeling than being at school. Kind of turning up in a Ferrari and being like the talk of the town, and knowing that you're making, thousands and thousands, no, millions more than your teachers. And it takes that idea, and then it's like it exists within this world that we live in at the moment, where it's kind of this hysterical kind of approach to this guaranteed new way of making money, power to the people kind of thing, and sort of all of the darker sides of human behavior attached to those booms, like charlatans, like trying to create new currencies, and actually it just being a way of making a load of money real quick, and then just messing over all the people that are invested in something that they think is going to have legs, and it doesn't, because it's just a con. And so it's kind of sort of takes that, it's like a tongue-in-cheek look at that world.
For the next record, you can do them when it crashes, like now, and people jump out the window, I guess. But anyway, it's exciting. I wanted to ask you, taking a page out of your own book, I was checking out your Instagram. If you just had 4 minutes, what would you do? That's a question that you posed on your Instagram lately.
Oh, yeah. Gosh. Well, I'd probably watch the TV with my daughter.
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah, I'd probably just put something on that would distract her, and I'd just watch her for those 4 minutes.
And Gus, what about you?
I'm just trying to think now. I think, there's probably like a couple of bottles of wine that I've got in my house that I've been saving for a very special occasion. So I suppose if I found out that, that occasion was unlikely to come around, I'd probably just uncork one of those and just neck it straight from the bottle. And, what better moment to drink that, 2005 Pomerol than right now.
Definitely. Well, make sure everyone check. Obviously, the tour kicks off in about a month or so. The new record, The Dream's incredible. So make sure everyone checks it out. I appreciate you guys. You guys are fun. I hope that I get to meet you guys in person. I like Zoom, but I'm more of an in-person guy. And you can definitely get to see my Larry David sensibility, sense of humor if you get to meet me in person. So hopefully when you come to LA, I think in LA you're playing maybe the Staples Center here.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, no, it'd be great to meet. Jim, RPR will tell you that we're an absolute scream in person. You're going to love us.
And obviously Madison Square Garden, which is huge. So if I'm in New York, maybe I'll see you at Madison Square Garden. If not, maybe in LA. I appreciate you coming on. You guys are great. Check out the new record. Alt J, incredible band. Great to meet you guys. Thanks for coming on the show. I will see you soon.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, guys.